World Regions, Geography 110, East Asia, Part 1. We're going to start with the learning outcomes. We're going to explain how humans have adapted and modified the landscapes of East Asia, describe how land and water management in East Asia may be impacted by climate change, list the main physical subregions of East Asia and describe their tectonic origins and related hazards, and identify the adverse ecological effects of urbanization, industrialization, and the modernization of agriculture. Distinguish the centers of power in East Asia in the pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial periods, and compare the development of differing economic experiments in the 20th and 21st centuries in China, South Korea, and Japan. Identify the geopolitical tensions within East Asia and trace the linkages of East Asian culture within and beyond the region using specific examples, and describe the forces that have caused significant declines in population in East Asia. So East Asia occupies the region on the eastern edge of Asia and includes the countries of China, Japan, North and South Korea, and Mongolia. You can see each of the countries here. It's this large region. If you go due west or due east of here, you hit the west coast of the United States and North America. So the region contains some of the largest and most dynamic economies in the world: South Korea, Japan, China. And the region also has some of the worst economies: Mongolia and North Korea. The region also faces some of the worst issues, including wealth disparities. 600 million Chinese live on less than $1 a day. North Korea, constant issues, poverty and lack of food, starvation, constant, very backward, very desolate. Environmental issues, extreme pollution all along this region here and flowing out from China because winds, the jet stream brings those issues this way, and volatile political situations. North and South Korea still at war, ethnic issues within China, and the region is highly susceptible to climate change because most of the population is here, and this is relatively low-lying. Even moderate increases in sea level will flood large areas along the coastal area along this region of China, and that could displace hundreds of millions of people. So what's going on? Tectonically active area. If you look at this right here, you see it sits on the Ring of Fire. That's this area right along here. That's called the Pacific Ring of Fire and goes all the way around the globe, comes up the western part of the South America, through Central America, and up all the way up through Alaska and back around. It's the boundary of the collision of the Indian and Eurasian plates, which have created the Himalayas. So this Australian plate is moving this direction. Indian plate already slammed into Eurasia. Eurasian plate up here is moving easterly. Philippine plate is moving northerly, causing this collision in these islands along here. That's the Philippines, and this is Japan. Pacific plate is also moving this direction, causing all this tectonic activity right here. So you have all these conflicting movements of large tectonic plates creating a lot of instability within the region, volcanic activity, earthquake, tectonic activity. There's a large number of active volcanoes and earthquake faults along this region. Right up through here, you see a lot of action. This is actually Iran. This is one of the most seismically active areas in the world. So you have a lot of tectonic activity, and this area through here is highly susceptible to earthquakes. Of course, you know Japan and tsunamis. Philippines also with tsunamis and volcanic activity. East Asia contains a variety of climate zones. So not only do we have a lot of tectonic activity, but we also have a big variance in climate. It's tropical in the southeast. So down in this region down here, it's very tropical. Arid and semi-arid in the west, that's this region here. Arctic tundra in the Himalayas, that's this region here up in the Himalayan plateau. Continental and continental polar in the Himalayas and the fringe area. So that's all this purplish. That's continental polar. And then marine tropical down here in Formosa. So it's very hot and humid down here. Relatively mild, good climate in here. So this is rich agriculturally. And then as you move up here, it becomes tougher agriculturally because of the climate. You have large polar air masses. In other words, these are cold and dry that flow down into this region. You have these mountains here, the Himalayas, which stretch along here. These create an orographic effect, which means that the moisture is dropped along this side, which you see the green here. But it doesn't penetrate to the other side. So on this side, it's relatively, this area here is relatively dry and cold. So you have a desert area through here, and this is a high dry desert, essentially. So it's very dry and cold. Region of extremes. This is a yurt out in Mongolia. You see very few trees, mostly grass. You notice down here in this erosion, there's really not a lot of erosion, which means there's not a lot of moisture. There's not a lot of rain falling, not a lot of water running off. Here you see flooded fields. You look back here, a lot of humidity in the air. You can see that just kind of gives you a contrast of the different regions. This is southeast region. This is in the farther north. East Asia has three dominant land structures. You have the Tibetan Plateau, which is this region right here. It's high, it's dry, a lot of snow, cold, slow growing period. This loose plateau, rich farmland through here, comes down through here. You see this region here is very low sea level. This is the inner China. This is the coastal margin, continental margin. The majority of the population lives in this region along here. Later when we see a population distribution map, you'll be able to see that more clearly. It's extremely vulnerable to global warming and sea level rise. This region here, most of this region here would be flooded out with sea level rise. China would lose about a third of its land. The central mountain and plateaus, this region through here, mostly non-ethnic Chinese, large Muslim population, a lot of political instability in this region, and it's also very impoverished. The wealth of China is concentrated right along this coast, right, this region right here. Not much this direction. What you're seeing here is environmental degradation. So the impact's more than just East Asia. It's kind of difficult to see. It looks like kind of a foggy print, but if you look at it, What this is here, this white, bright white, is moisture, but the rest of this is smog. And it's impacting Japan and South Korea in particular. You notice in North Korea there's almost no smog. That's because there's no manufacturing to speak of. A lot of smog in this region, incredibly heavy through here. If you look at the coastline here, and this is brown right along there, that's outflow. So that's pollution in the water. A lot of this that's airborne ends up getting caught in the jet stream. That's what you see right here. And this ends up in North America. So this brown air flows across the Pacific and ends up in the western part of the North America and results in acid rain, which is responsible for damaging forests in British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. Now, this region here, the air stays in the unhealthy to extremely unhealthy range for most of the year. Long-term impacts, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but the long-term impacts of this on the Chinese people will be extreme. I would look for a lot of things like lung cancer, lung diseases, emphysema, breathing issues. China has built the largest dam in the world, the Three Gorges Dam, and the dam supplies about 10% of China's electric energy. But the blockage created by the dam threatens indigenous species like the Chinese alligator and the Chinese sturgeon. This dam is huge. Some scientists believe the dam will cause additional pressures on underlying tectonic faults, resulting in catastrophic earthquakes in a region that is severely has a lot of severe earthquakes, which have caused as many as 1 million deaths from earthquake action. And this dam is huge, and the water that backs up behind it is going to create a situation where you could have potential extremely severe earthquakes. The Green Revolution, hydraulic empires. The ability of controlling flooding resulted in the creation of empires in China that some term hydraulic empires. And the reason they call them hydraulic is this ability to control the flooding allowed them to develop agriculture to a really significant level and produce lots of grains that allowed the population to balloon, and that allowed the creation of empires. Around 6500 BCE, millet, soybeans, peaches, and apricots were domesticated in the subhuman northern regions. And at the same time, rice, mandarin oranges, and tea were domesticated in the southern humid regions. And then chicken and pigs were also domesticated. And the topography was severely altered using terraces to expand farming onto hillsides and mountainsides. And here's an example of the terraces. Each of these is a different level, and you can see how extensive they made a use of all available land. And it's created a lot of conservation issues also. Increasing pesticides and fertilizers have adverse effects on farmers as well as the land itself. You see this woman's walking around and she's spraying, I don't know, pesticides or insecticides. Nothing on, no protection whatsoever. China is responsible for some of the most extensive illegal harvesting of endangered species across the planet, and endangered species that are threatened include the elephants, rhinos, various large cats, and various whale species.